My name is Eli. I don't live in the town I'm going to talk about anymore. But sometimes, when I lie awake at night and hear the wind move through the trees outside my window, I remember it. And I remember him. His name was Thomas Avery. He disappeared in 1983. That was before I was even born. But in that town, Ashstead Hollow, everyone knew the story, even kids. It was something passed down like an old song or a bedtime warning. People would say, "Don't walk too deep into the woods after sundown, or you'll end up like Thomas Avery." Most kids laughed when they said it, others whispered, and a few didn't speak at all. They just looked toward the trees at the edge of the playground. The forest there was thick, darker than you'd expect, even during the day. Somehow, the light never felt strong enough to reach through the trees. It was the kind of place that always felt watched. I used to bike past it every morning on the way to school. Even if the sun was out, I'd always pedal a little faster when I passed the trail that led into the woods. They said Thomas lived alone in a cabin on the outskirts of town. He wasn't strange exactly, just quiet, polite when spoken to, but always looking past you, like he was hearing something else behind your words. He worked at the radio repair shop on Main Street. Old radios mostly, vintage things. He liked machines that whispered. People remembered that about him. When he vanished, it wasn't like in the movies. There were no screams, no police sirens in the middle of the night, no news vans or flashing lights. It was quieter than that. Thomas closed up shop at 6:00 p.m., like always. A neighbor saw him walking up the road a little after 6:30. He was heading toward the forest path behind his cabin. That's the last time anyone saw him. The next morning, his front door was open. The lamp by the window was still on. And a radio, an old wood-paneled set with warm yellow dials, was playing a soft hum. No music, just a steady sound, like a heartbeat in static. The forest was searched, of course. Dozens of people combed the trails for days. They found nothing. No blood, no footprints, no signs of a struggle, just the woods. 1 week later, they gave up. I moved away from Ashstead Hollow when I was 21. I told people it was because of school. But really, I think it was the trees. You can only feel like you're being watched for so long before you start watching back. But last month, I got a letter. It was in a plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a photograph and a note. The photo was old, faded and bent at the corners. It showed Thomas Avery standing in front of his cabin. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't looking at the camera either. His eyes were turned toward the woods behind him. The note said, "It's still playing." No name, no date, just those 3 words. I don't know how they found me. I hadn't been back in over a decade. But something about that note kept me awake at night. I started reading about him again. Old articles, archived interviews. Most of the details were the same, but there were things I'd forgotten. One article, printed just 2 days after he disappeared, quoted a neighbor named Janet Rourke. She said, "Tom said he kept hearing it. A low sound in the woods. Said it came from the trees. Thought it was a machine at first, but the longer he listened, the more it felt like it was listening back." That part wasn't in any of the versions we told on the playground. The next week, I drove back to Ashstead Hollow. It hadn't changed much. The gas station was still there. So was the diner, the bookstore, and the old post office. But the repair shop was closed. Boarded up, actually. Thomas's cabin was at the end of Willow Ridge Road. No one had lived there since. The windows were dusty, the paint was peeling, but the door was unlocked. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Dust. Wood. Something else, faint and dry. Like old paper and metal. There were still tools on the workbench. A half-repaired radio sat on the table. And on the shelf by the window was the same radio described in the police report. The one that was still playing when they found it. I turned the dial. It didn't click. The sound was still there. A soft hum. Not loud, not sharp, just steady. It didn't sound like static. It sounded deeper, like it was coming from somewhere far below. I stood still. The house felt colder now, like the sound was pulling the warmth out of the room. I looked outside. The sun was lowering, and the trees seemed closer than before. I told myself I'd only stay one night, just to see, just to listen. That was yesterday. Tonight, I'm sitting by the window with the lamp on. The radio is still humming. And in the forest behind the cabin, I swear I just saw a flicker of movement. Something pale, slow, not walking, but gliding between the trees. I don't think it saw me. Not yet. But I'm starting to wonder if this sound isn't a message, but a memory. One that never stopped playing. I didn't sleep that first night, Dot. Not really. I sat in a chair by the window, the old lamp glowing soft and yellow beside me, Dot. The radio was still humming. It hadn't changed. Not in pitch. Not in volume, Dot. It was constant, like a heartbeat in the room. But not mine, Dot. And not the house's either, Dot. Something else, Dot, outside comma. The trees didn't move, but the shadows did. I kept telling myself it was the moon, maybe the wind, Dot. But the branches weren't swaying, Dot. And the air was still, Dot. Around midnight, I heard something, Dot. Not a knock, Dot. Not a voice, Dot. It was 3 slow clicks, Dot. Tap, Dot. Tap, Dot. Tap, Dot. Like someone drumming their fingers on wood. I held my breath and listened, Dot. But it didn't happen again. Dot, just the hum, Dot. In the morning, I walked into town. I didn't know what I was looking for. A clue, maybe. A person who remembered more than they'd said, Dot. Something in the quiet between facts, Dot. The local library was still open. I asked the librarian, a woman in her 60s, if they had any archives, Dot. She asked what I was researching. I said, Thomas Avery. Her expression changed, Dot. Not fear, Dot, but something close, Dot. Like she was remembering a bruise that had just started to fade, Dot. She brought out a dusty binder marked Ashstead Reports, 1980, 1985. Dot. Inside were photocopies of local newspapers, Dot. Some were yellowed, Dot. Others had ink that had started to blur. I flipped until I saw his name, Dot. May 19, 1983. Dot. Headline: Local man missing, search underway in North Woods. Same details as before, Dot. But buried near the end was a quote from the town's sheriff at the time. We followed the sound as far as we could, but it just kept moving. You think it's 10 feet ahead, then it's behind you. We don't know what we were hearing. Another article from 2 weeks later had something even stranger. Dot. The headline read, Third disappearance in 5 years near Ashstead Forest. I stopped. Dot. 3 question mark. Thomas was the only one. March 16th. The sound is following. Thought it was my mind at first, but now it's in the house. I closed all the windows, still came in. March 29th. Dreamed of a face, pale, no eyes. It stood in the fog outside my door. Woke up, and the radio was already on. The entries continued like that. Short, shaky, fewer words over time. His last one, May 18th, I'm going in. If it wants me, I'll find out why. But I won't go alone. That was the night he disappeared. I picked up the cassette. There was no label. The tape itself looked fine, not cracked, but it was cold to the touch. I still had an old cassette player in the car. I brought it inside, placed the tape in, and pressed play. At first, nothing, just silence. Then, that same low hum, but layered underneath, something else. A voice, whispering. I couldn't make out the words. It wasn't English. It wasn't even clear if it was human, but it was trying to speak. The pitch changed, slow and warbled, like it was being pulled apart while speaking. I stopped the tape. The room felt wrong. The air, too still. My mouth dry. I looked at the broken watch again. 33. That's the time the neighbors saw him walking toward the trees. Later that evening, I followed the trail behind the cabin. The map Thomas left had a small X marked deep into the forest. It was labeled Signal. The trail was narrow. Branches clawed at my coat. Leaves whispered things I couldn't quite catch. Birds didn't sing. No bugs. No wind. Just the sound of my own steps. And the hum. I didn't have a radio with me, but the sound was there. Quiet at first, like hearing music through a wall, then louder and stronger, until it felt like it was inside my chest. I stopped walking. The trees around me were wrong, thicker, too tall, too close. And the light, it wasn't fading like normal twilight. It was leaking, like something was sucking it away. I turned around. The trail was gone, completely gone. Just trees now, endless and still. The hum pulsed once, like a breath. Then it stopped. Silence. I stood frozen for what felt like forever. Then I saw it. A cabin, half covered in moss, roof caved in, windows shattered, but something inside flickered. A glow, like a lantern or a radio. I stepped toward it. My hand trembled as I reached for the door, and inside, I swear I heard a voice say my name. I don't remember opening the door. One moment I was outside, staring at the old cabin. The next, I was inside. It smelled like the earth. Wet, cold, full of rot and silence. Dust covered every surface. Spiderwebs hung like curtains from the ceiling. But there was something strange. No footprints, not even my own. It was like I had floated in. The glow I saw from outside came from a radio in the corner. It was old, older than the one in Thomas's house. Tube lit, heavy, the kind you had to warm up, but it was on. I hadn't touched it. It was already humming, that same sound, low, steady. But this time, I could hear something under it, a pattern, like someone breathing in and holding it. Then again, long, drawn breaths. I stepped forward. The boards creaked, but only inside my ears. The sound didn't echo. It was like the room swallowed noise. I moved toward the table near the window. There were pages there, damp and smudged with mold. Still, I could make out the writing. It wasn't Thomas's handwriting, but the name at the top of the first page said, Mark Collins, the man who vanished in 1981. The paper read, March 3rd, 1981, I found the signal. I don't think it's a machine. It's not broadcasting. It's remembering. March 8th. There are shapes in the trees. I don't know if they're people or not. They don't blink. I tried to speak. My voice didn't come out. March 15th. The cabin is a mouth. Every time I sleep, I lose time. Every time I breathe, it listens. The last page simply said, It's inside me now. I dropped the pages. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls had moved closer. I backed away, toward the door. But when I opened it, the forest wasn't there. Just black. Not darkness, not night, but absence. Like someone had painted the world black and forgot to stop. I reached out my hand. It didn't vanish into the dark, but it didn't touch anything either. No wind, no leaves, no ground, just nothing. I turned back toward the cabin, heart pounding. The radio had stopped. In its place, I heard a voice. Not from outside, not even from the room, but from somewhere deeper, below the floor, below me. It whispered, "You brought it back." I stumbled, knocked over the chair near the table. Dust rose like smoke. I reached into my pocket, feeling the old key Thomas had left in the box. Something in my head told me it belonged here. I didn't think. I just moved toward a door near the back. It looked like a pantry at first, but inside was a staircase, wooden, thin, spiraling downward, into the dark. I didn't want to go. Every part of me screamed not to. But the hum had returned, and it was louder below. I stepped down. Each board groaned, but the sound didn't leave the steps. It stayed in the wood, trapped. At the bottom was a room, round, stone, like an old root cellar, but older than the cabin, much older. The walls were covered in carvings, circles, eyes, trees bending inward. And at the center was a chair, not wooden, not plastic, made of stone. Sitting in it was a man. He was still, eyes closed, breathing slow. His skin was grayish, like bark. His hair had fallen out, but his lips moved, just slightly, murmuring, repeating the same line. Not yet, not yet, not yet. I took one step closer. The air was heavy, hard to breathe. And then he opened his eyes. They weren't dead. They were too alive. Wide, sharp, full of the forest. He looked at me and whispered, "Did it follow you?" I didn't know what to say. He stood, slowly, bones ticking. Not like breaking, like growing. He reached out and touched my shoulder. "You heard it, didn't you? The hum. It found your name." I asked him, barely able to speak, "Who are you?" He smiled, sadly. I was Thomas, before it remembered me. I ran, up the stairs, through the cabin, into the black outside. But the black was gone now. The forest had returned, exactly as I'd left it. But when I turned around, the cabin wasn't there. Only trees, tall, still, unmoving. And behind them, nothing. I made it back to Thomas's real cabin just as night fell. I slammed the door and turned on every light. The radio was still playing, that same hum, but it sounded different now, like it was smiling. I sat in the chair by the window again. My hands shook. My mind raced. Had I really seen him? Was that Thomas? Was he alive? Or was that what was left of him? I looked at the tape recorder still sitting on the table. Something told me, play it again. So I did. And this time, I understood the words. I pressed play. The cassette began with silence, just like before. Then the hum returned. But now I could hear it. It wasn't just sound. It was speaking. Low, layered, buried inside itself, a voice beneath the noise. A whisper that wasn't made for human ears, yet I could understand it. It didn't use words. It used memory. I saw images in my head, flashes of forest paths, flickers of faces, A cabin being built, a hand reaching out in the dark. I saw Thomas again, but younger, smiling, his hands fixing a radio. Then he stopped smiling. He tilted his head like he heard something outside. He walked out the door, and the forest swallowed him. The hum grew louder, and then it said something, clear, like it had waited a long time for me to hear. You are the last listener. I pulled the tape from the player, but the hum didn't stop. It was still in the room, in the walls, in the windows. I covered my ears, but the sound was inside me now. Not hurting, just waiting. I stayed in the cabin another day. I tried to write down what I'd heard, but every time I tried, the words faded. Not from the paper, from my mind, like the forest had pressed delete, but some things stayed, not facts, just feelings. I remembered what the man in the stone chair said. It found your name. I remembered the map, the symbol labeled signal. That wasn't a location. It was a warning. I left Ashstead Hollow that evening. Didn't tell anyone I was there. Didn't say goodbye. I drove all night. Didn't stop until the radio in my car went silent, no matter the station. That was the only way I knew I was far enough away. It's been 6 days. I've smashed the tape. I've buried the notebook. I've burned the key. But every night around 6:33, I hear it again. That hum, faint, but steady. And last night, I saw someone standing at the edge of my yard. Not moving, not blinking, their head tilted, as if listening. I think the forest is growing. So if you're listening to this, if you found this story buried in a file, or heard it whispered in the static of an old video, don't go looking for the cabin, don't follow the hum, and don't listen too long, because the more you listen, the more it remembers you. Thank you for joining me in the quiet. If you enjoy these whispered stories from the dark, subscribe to Echoes in the Fog for more mysteries that linger in the silence. Sleep softly tonight. And if you hear something in the distance, don't answer.